So I assume you all know why we're here. For some insight into financial projections. Before I go to the presentation, I just want to explain, one sec. My bad, I gotta do this. There we go. So before I go to the presentation, I just want to explain who I am. And I don't want to do it to brag. That's not the reason I'm doing it. Simply the reason is because it's really important to know, just as you're building a startup, who's giving you advice and who's mentoring you and what you're learning from these presentations. So, and I'll explain why in a second. So my background is, Buffalo born and bred, left for a while, but the motherland called me back. Came back about 7 years ago. And if we're doing it mathematically, I would say my experience has been 70% in venture capital, and then about 30% in real estate, in private equity in Buffalo. And this is really important to know because any advisor or mentor that you talk to, whatever their insight or their advice to you is, it's always going to be filtered through their experiences and their bias. It's not the be all end all. There's not one way to do things. There's multiple different paths to success. And I would say when you're building a startup, the most important thing is to be able to sort of define problems on a daily basis and then creatively solve those problems. And if you can do that day in and day out, you will get to a place of success. It's going to happen. You're going to have advisors and mentors along the way. They're going to tell you who might tell you solutions to certain things or might give you conflicting advice. I would say, if they are helping you to define a problem, you can take that advice. If they're helping you to give you a solution to a problem, that's fine as well, but don't take it as a be all end all. You have to do that yourself. They're just giving you advice on things they're not fully aware of at the end of the day. So that also applies to me with this presentation a little bit, and I'll explain why. So the objective for this presentation is really to not give you an Excel workbook, because you can find those on Google. I don't want to regurgitate what Google says when it comes to the format of the projections. What I want to do is really focus on how you justify the assumptions that fuel your numbers in the financial projections. And those assumptions should always be backed by hard data and hopefully some real world validation. So here's some sort of general themes that will flow throughout the presentation. Also just musings that from sort of I've learned through investing in the local ecosystem and beyond. So I would say that most early stage investors don't really take financial projections seriously. When I say early stage investors, I'm talking about investors who are simply investing in a business idea or a business plan that hasn't been tested or validated in the real world yet. And the reason they don't take them seriously is because no matter how competent or intelligent you are, what is in your business plan probably won't be what's going to manifest itself in real life 5 years down the road, or 10 years down the road. The second you start executing on this business plan, you're going to start making all these micro and macro adjustments, these slight pivots and stuff, and you'll eventually find your way. But there's a very high chance you're not going to hit those projections exactly. But later stage investors, Series A investors, when you have a product, you've found some sort of product market fit, hopefully, and you're ready to scale it. Those ones will take financial projections pretty seriously because you're actually using data that your startup's producing and extrapolating it. So I bet in your entrepreneur classes, you've learned all about hockey stick growth. And that's basically demonstrating that in year 3, your revenue is just going to take off to the moon. And what that really is for most early stage investors is just a proxy or a confirmation that you have a very large market that can hopefully produce, sales of 50 million, say in year 5, just hypothetically. But it also shows that you have a bigger vision for the company just beyond growing it locally. But that being said, financial projections are still very important, and I'll explain why. So they're important because they demonstrate really how well you know your industry, how well you know your market, and how well you know sort of how to execute on your business plan. They really tell the story of your business plan in excruciating detail. And they also outline the sort of goals you believe that you can realistically hit and will strive for. Um, so what I would say is what most people do is that they tend to do financial projections with their business plan, but I think the whole thing should really be reversed. The first thing you should be doing, and I'm sure you guys know a bit about this, is customer discovery and validating that business model canvas. Basically testing your business idea before pouring a ton of time into it, before pouring, potentially your own money or getting other people's money in it. Those relationships are typically hard to salvage after something goes wrong. So if you guys don't know about customer discovery and how to do it, there's a Swiss business theorist. His name is Alex Osterwald. He basically wrote the Bible on customer discovery and business model canvases. He has 3 books that they're sort of in a series, which are really, really good. So those, I highly suggest picking those up and following what those say, because those will give you some sort of validation, hopefully, of your business idea. So as you're testing your business idea, that's when you should use the data from your tests to do financial projections. And then the last thing that you should create is your business plan, which is basically a summary of your financial projections. Your financial projections are a numerical story of your business plan at the end of the day. As I said before, I won't go into it too much, but when your post-revenue projections start to equal your budget, investors at the Series A stage might start to question you why you didn't sort of hit those goals or those projections a year later. So that's when they become very, very, very serious. What investors are going to do is they're going to test your assumptions behind your financial projections. And what you're demonstrating to them is how well you know your business model and your industry. So when I say your business model industry, when you're building financial projections, which is what we're going to talk about in a second, you need to reach out to potential customers to test your problem or test your solution if they have a problem. You need to reach out to potential vendors as well, because they're the ones who will give you pricing and costing for things like manufacturing, or if you're using a marketing agency, how much are they going to cost? And if you sort of do this exploratory exercise of reaching out to all those people, or looking it up online and combining those 2 sources, you start to learn exactly what your industry wants and needs and how it sort of functions and modulates and evolves. So what financial projections are in the early days right now, it's really a good exercise in learning about the practicality of your business model, whether or not it's going to work, whether or not it's going to produce profits, while building sort of industry competence. And that's what early stage investors want to know. They want to know that you're competent in your industry, you know about it. You're also, passionate about your business idea. It's also solving a problem for someone, and that you're willing to do whatever it takes to keep it going and not give up. So your projections at the end of the day should align with your business plan and strategy. That's something I've seen a lot when doing due diligence on deals, is that the projections don't align. And that sort of means that this person or this startup at the end of the day didn't really pay the excruciating detail to their strategy that they should be paying, should be paying attention to, because that is essentially the most important thing. That's what you're going to execute on. Financial projections are a different exercise for each industry. A life sciences or drug discovery company is probably going to show years and years of losses as they go through clinical trials, because they won't have a product until the end of phase 3 and hopefully an FDA approval. But a SaaS company, a software as a service company, will hopefully start to be able to sell year 1. So it's really tough to communicate, I would say, meaningful value to everyone from a specific industry example. So I'm going to pretty much present general rules, like tips and tricks for each line item. But if you have a question about your specific industry or your specific financial projections, that's probably better for a one-on-one later. And the last sort of general theme, one of the, I guess, cardinal rules as well, which I should have included later, is you really only need a P&L or income statement right now. Cash flow statements can start to get tough in projections because you don't know when you're going to end up paying your vendors or when your customers are going to pay you. So the timing on your accounts receivable is highly speculative, and also your accounts payable. But what you definitely don't need is a balance sheet, because that literally shows your assets and liabilities at one point in time, and you're not going to know what your assets and liabilities are going to look like on only like December 31st, 2022. So diving into what I said I wasn't going to do, but I think this is important because it's not typically on Google, or there might be sort of conflicting opinions about it on Google, is this how to sort of do a summary of your financial projections. So this is a condensed summary of what should be going on in your Excel book. It's very simple. It's, at the end of the day, your top line is how much revenue can you generate. Your second line is cost of goods sold, which I'll explain later. But it's how much did it take to manufacture your product or create it, excluding distribution costs and sales costs. What is your gross profit revenue, which is revenue minus COGS or cost of goods sold. What's your gross profit margin, which is your gross profit divided by your revenue times 100, turned into a percentage. And then your expenses, which is sales and marketing, which can include salaries as well. R&D, which is basically your product or tech development, and then G&A, which is pretty much everything else. So at the end of the day, you basically subtracting your revenue minus expenses, and you get your net income. You don't have to worry about taxes, depreciation, amortization, all that stuff, which we'll go through a little bit later. It's not really important for investors. So the first thing I would do after you're starting to do some customer discovery and validate this thing, is find a template for projection. So the two ones that I suggest are listed here. There's an Equidam one and one by Score Small Business. They're really nice because they're automatically each sheet is automatically linked and programmed. So when you enter a revenue number, it'll actually like split it out between all the months and stuff automatically if you would like. It's nicely programmed, so you don't have to do that yourself. And both of these templates also have instructions as to what to fill out in certain boxes. What they don't tell you is the right way to sort of justify those assumptions behind what's going in those boxes. So that stuff I'm not going to go over is these templates because you can find them on Google. But moving on to the sort of cardinal rules. What you want to do, most investors will want to see you project 5 years into the future, even though if you're if you're an early stage company, that probably won't pan out. That summary I showed you on the last slide, that's the one that's going in the pitch deck. You should have a month-to-month breakdown ready to go in an Excel workbook, which is that Equidam or Score Small Business template I was talking about. And then you should also be ready to answer questions about your assumptions, because that's how investors are going to test your competence around running your business. And if you want, you can prepare a few what they call basket slides at the end of the pitch deck that go deeper into how you arrived at your assumptions, but that's completely up to you. So I'm going to go through those line items I talked about and describe how you should get or arrive at those line items. So the first thing you want to sort of figure out is, this is what I call it a cumulative line item, because there's usually sub line items underneath it. So the sub line items really consist of, how many products or services do you think you're going to sell? Is it, are you let's just say a cleaning company with 4 or 5 different cleaning products, or are you just selling one piece of software for now? You need to figure out how many you're gonna sell at the end of the day. You need to figure out how you're selling them. Are you going to be selling them via subscription, where you charge customers, equal amount every month, or are there different tiers of subscription? Is it a one-off, basically, where it's a one-off sale and then you don't charge them again? Or are you selling services? Is there a consulting part to this where billable hours can be used? And finally, you want to figure out if are you upselling or cross-selling? I wouldn't suggest that in the early days when you're trying to validate your business model, because you don't know whether the core idea is going to work or not. So you're probably not going to know whether the upsell or cross-sell is going to work. But an example would be, if you buy, let's say, Salesforce or something like that, a big company buys Salesforce, they usually also will charge you for implementation so that Salesforce can be tailored to your organization. So the software would be a subscription, but the implementation would be something like billable hours or potentially a flat fee, who knows, or one-off flat fee. But these are all things you need to sort of think about when you're creating that revenue line item at the top of your financial projections. And the way to calculate, or the way to project or speculate on revenue, is a bottoms-up approach. And what I see all the time, which is complete BS, it just shows, I think, laziness too, is the top-down approach, where companies will say, this is a $1 billion market, and if we just capture 2% of it by year 5, we'll have 20 million in revenue. That doesn't answer, how are they going to capture that? Do they have enough staff to capture that? How do they even arrive at that? Is there too much competition to capture that? What makes them better than the competition that's currently trying to capture that? So bottoms up approach is really thinking about practically how you can really build and speculate on these revenue numbers, but at the same time have a really sort of detailed explanation if an investor asks how you arrived at that number. So the first thing you have to do is really determine the size of your target market. How many organizations or individuals are in your target market? And your target market, I define it, and most people, I think most investors define it as those who have the strongest need for your product and can afford to buy it at the end of the day. So I'll give you an example real quickly. We recently invested in a company that sells software to nonprofits. And I would say, so they started selling their post-revenue. They started selling, so they have some early data about their product market fit. But what they realized is that, there was only a certain segment of the nonprofit market that could actually afford to buy their product. And that segment was, I think it was nonprofits that have total funding above like 2 million. So in that case, they were able to go online. There's luckily a lot of nonprofit data, market data online for free. But I know you guys at UB have access to some pretty cool databases for market data. So basically they went online, got this data, found the number of nonprofits that were above that 2 million funding number. And that was their target market at the end of the day. And now they're reaching out to each one of those or marketing to each one of those. So I know probably most of you guys aren't that far yet where you have a product that you're selling. So what you want to do is sort of validate your target market via customer discovery, which is something I talked about before. If you don't know what that is, definitely look it up, definitely get into it. It's a lifesaver. So the next thing you need to sort of determine is how you'll be marketing and selling to your target market. You can sort of figure out, you can go online and type in what are the different inbound and outbound marketing strategies. You have tons of different marketing channels, everything from, SEO to paid ads, to email marketing, to cold calling, to content creation. And you can sort of and you can also find how they tend to perform in different industries. So there's industry comparables for this. And what you're trying to do at the end of the day is figure out, okay, if it's just me, and 2 other people working on the startup, and we're all selling in year 1, and say we're selling like a piece of software that requires a demo to sell it to the customer. How many sales meetings can we realistically do in a week or a month? So let's just say hypothetically, the 3 of you could do 100 sales or 100 demos in a month. What is the typical close rate on those demos? So let's just say it was, you're looking at industry comparables, you're looking at like the SaaS industry, for example, and the SaaS industry says that, or the industry benchmarks basically say that You know, on an email marketing campaign, there's like a 10% open rate, which means, so if you send an email out to 1,000 people, 10% are going to open it. That'll be 100. Out of those, you have, let's say 50% do demos. That's 50. Then you have, let's say, a 10% close rate. So at that point, the close rate, that conversion rate, is if you did, let's say, as I said, well, actually, let's use 100 demos just to make it easier. And you have a 25% close rate, or that's sort of the industry benchmark. That's something you think maybe you can hit. At that point, that means you're closing 25 deals a month in year one with your current staffing. But say you're going to ramp up, right? After you do those 25 deals, like you'll have some revenue to spend on hiring more people. At that point, you're looking at, okay, if I hire another sales guy or gal, how many demos can they do a week? How many, with that same close rate, how many how many deals can they close on a month, and how much revenue does that contribute to? Realistically close with your current and future staffing. And you can maybe assume if there's, you can maybe assume, you know, there's some inbound traffic or organic traffic that's being created too. But I would say mostly assume that you're doing most of it outbound in the early days, meaning through salespeople and sort of demoing and whatnot. But obviously it's be different per product and per industry. But you're trying to find how many sales you can realistically close and multiply that by the price of your product. And I would say the safest thing to do in the early days is assume you're pricing close to your competitors, because you don't know your manufacturing costs yet. So it'd be not the best idea to necessarily undercut your competitors. And if you sort of do try to, you know, if you find that your manufacturing costs are too high, and that you can only sell it, you know, 25% above your competitors, and you're not offering that much value above your competitors, then you probably don't have a profitable business model or something that's going to be able to scale. So just for this, assume you're pricing close to your competitors. And if you're using a subscription business model, you sort of have to factor in a churn rate. And there's industry comparables for that if you Google it. Basically, a churn rate is, you know, how many customers are canceling your subscription every month or every year. And I know they can range anywhere from, like, you know, 0 to 10 or 15%, but I would do scenarios. So like 2% would be optimistic scenario, 10% would be sort of, I guess, an average or baseline, and like 15 would be like pessimistic, for example. And then you have to factor all that in basically to your revenue projections. So these ones are go quicker. That was the longest one. So line item 2, which is the cost of goods sold. So the definition, as I alluded to before, is the direct cost of producing the goods sold by a company. This amount includes the cost of materials and labor directly used to create the good, but it does not include indirect expenses such as distribution costs and sales force costs, which are things that we'll talk about in the next line item, which is expenses. So this is next bullet's pretty much an obvious thing, which is sort of important to explain. The cost of goods sold of hardware or anything, I guess in the VC world, they call it atoms versus bits. So something that exists in the physical world versus software. The COGS of that is always going to be greater than the COGS of software, because you need raw materials. You're going to need plastics. You need, say you're, you know, creating, I don't know, a printer. You need or a computer. You need plastics, metals, semiconductors, et cetera, et cetera. But the COGS of software is pretty attractive, because with software, you can literally hit the space bar and it replicates at zero cost. That's just something to discern, something to be cognizant of. And the best thing you can do for COGS when you're projecting them is you need to validate them. So, you know, if you're creating, I don't know, a Beanie Baby or something, you know, reach out to contract manufacturers that might be able to produce that for you. Figure out how much it would cost, you know, sign an NDA with them, tell them what you're thinking about, see how much it would cost to produce different quantities of the solutions, and, you know, get estimates for 10 pieces, 50 pieces, 1,000 pieces, 10,000, and see if there's an economies of scale there. this is really, I think this is pretty important to know before you actually build the product, because if you can't manufacture them cheaply and you're selling them way, way above market price, and you're not, again, not offering value over the competitors, then you really don't have too much of a business there. So the other thing, and then on the flip side, if you're doing something with software and you don't have, say, like a CTO who can develop it on your team, or you don't have people who are working for equity currently that can develop it on your team, look up, how much an app developer would cost, and just, same thing, sign an NDA, tell them about your project, and just see how much it would cost. And at the end of the day, because as I said before, at the end of the day, you're just attempting to validate, if that gross margin is healthy. And if it isn't, it might be very tough to build a scalable business because you're subtracting all the expenses from that gross margin, which is something we're going to go through next. So the next line item, with all the sub-line items that I'm going to describe right here, is expenses. So the first sort of line item is salaries. You can do them sort of by department. Who are you hiring and why are you hiring them? Does it align to your business model or strategy? So for example, in year one, you probably don't need to hire an HR person. What you need in year one is tech product development people and sales and marketing people, and maybe operations as things get more complex, and then potentially HR as you hire more and more. And you also have to think about things like, are you using consultants or agencies for tech dev or doing it in-house? And all those things can factor into your salary line item. One trick I use, which no investor can question, is if you use the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, it'll tell you average salaries for each role in every single region in the US. So that's really good for estimating these salaries and making sure they're accurate. Other questions you have to ask yourself: are you going to hire as full-time employees, W-2s at first, or are you going to hire as independent contractors? I've seen a lot of startups go from independent contractors to W-2s because then they don't have to pay benefits and all the other good stuff. You can look up payroll taxes for state and benefits if you're hiring W-2s, or that Equidem model I was talking about. That Excel workbook actually has I think it's like a sort of like a built-in percentage calculator of your payroll taxes. And then for sales salaries, it's extremely important to anticipate what your commission is you're gonna be paying to these people. What's the bonus structure? And you can look up sort of industry comparables, like what is the typical commission to a software sales guy? And those percentages are available online. And the last thing is, you should be mindful what you pay yourself in the early days, because investors, especially at the pre-seed round, especially in Buffalo, won't necessarily pay your salary in the early days. They want to see that money going towards tech development and sales. But that, that's different in every city. It's different with every investor. So that's just sort of what I've seen in Buffalo. And there's not too many sort of pre-seed investors out there in Buffalo. I'll go into that later. So marketing, what's your marketing strategy? This is obviously pretty tough, but what can be your anticipated digital and analog ad spend? Look up, what scaling Facebook ads might cost, or what is how do you think you're going to sell this thing? What marketing channels and how much do they cost? Will you be attending trade shows? Can you actually locate those trade shows and get the fees for those trade shows as well? Are you be using software tools? Are you be using things like, HubSpot? How much does that cost? Travel, which is obviously a little tougher now, will be required to meet customers, partners, or suppliers. So that's another line item you need to sort of think about. Rent or utilities. If you are planning to get an office, how much do you need, assuming 100 to 100 square feet per employee? And I'm saying that based on just simply a co-working model, not a private desk or private office model. But if you're not getting an office, then that's not a line item. How much and you can figure out, how much you're going to pay based on how much our rents are in the region, and for how much square footage as well. And if you have to pay utilities, that stuff obviously you should investigate. And are they included in the rent? The next line item is telephones, internet, and software. What software do you need to run your business? Do you need product design software? Do you need a CRM, like Salesforce or HubSpot? Or potentially a full ERP, and I'll shamelessly plug my friend's company here, but Odoo's one locally in Buffalo. Do you need office equipment and supplies? Are you buying computers? Do you need desks and chairs? How much do these realistically cost? You can look that up on like Best Buy and Office Depot and stuff like that. Insurance. Do you need any insurances? You can look up what insurances do startups need in X industry? Legal. What are the legal startup costs? Do you need contracts or do you need contracts for when you make a sale or when you manufacture? How much is that going to cost? I know you guys have access to eLaw, which is an excellent resource to use, and Matt Pelkey does a really good job. So hopefully those are mostly covered. So PPE, not personal protective equipment, it's property, plant, and equipment here. Do you need to own any equipment basically for your startup? And how much will that cost? And then miscellaneous is basically what else it will cost to operate your business. So the last line item, when you subtract or when you generate revenue, subtract COGS from it, and then subtract all your expenses, you're gonna be left with what they call is EBITDA, which is earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. You don't have to worry about calculating interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization yet. That's something that will factor into your financial statements once you start to generate revenue. Or actually even in the early days too. If you do get an early investor, he's probably going to want financial statements that will hopefully be audited by a third party or an accountant. But this is just a note, like depreciation, you don't have to worry about depreciation or amortization really at all if you're not asset heavy, if you don't have a ton of equipment, whether that's like, factory equipment or office assets. So for bits-based businesses or software-based businesses, it really doesn't really apply too much in the early days. So this is the final slide, which I think is really important to go through, and a really essential question about your business and something you sort of need to ask yourself. How much do you need to raise at the end of the day? And the first thing you need to figure out is your business venture fundable? If it isn't, like that is completely 100% okay. You can still have an outsized impact on your community. You can still make a very, very healthy living. I know a ton of small local business owners around here that are doing extremely well, but their businesses aren't venture fundable. And if your business idea is at the intersection of your passion and something the market wants, or you're solving a problem for someone, it's at that intersection, then build it, go for it. Because it can be a very rewarding path in the end, regardless if it's venture fundable or not. But there are ways to see if your business is venture fundable. So the first thing you want to look at is how big is your market? If it's multiple $billion and there's some pretty big incumbents in the space that you're seeking to disrupt or displace. So a pretty simple example is Uber. Uber was seeking to disrupt the taxi market, which is an enormous incumbent. The only way they could really do that is if they sort of hit scale, were able to spread to a bunch of different cities. And in order to do that quickly, because they knew that competition was going to be fierce, because they have very low barriers to entry. I mean, there's really no patents or IP around Uber's solution. They knew they needed capital to basically beat out the competition, because anyone could come up and spring up, which they did. There's a bunch of rideshare apps now. So that is sort of how you define if your business is venture fundable. If you're targeting more of a niche, there's not too many players in that niche, or if the market is highly fragmented. So for example, like if you're an HVAC company and you just want to start an HVAC company because it's like, a really steady, healthy salary, and you're doing what everyone else is doing, you're not probably going to attract venture capital unless you're, a third generation HVAC that, heats, cools, and, acts as a car or something. Like that's, if you have a sort of more commoditized product and that's your passion and that's what you want to do, and the market's fragmented like that, that's totally fine. Those businesses are known to be profitable, and you can get them off the ground. So if you do determine if you are venture fundable, or if you need just some startup capital, because going back to what I said earlier about pre-seed funding in Buffalo, so no one in Buffalo is really going to fund your idea. No venture capitalist or angel investor in Buffalo is going to fund your idea. You're going to get that. You're going to get that money through family and friends, but more importantly, the resources that you have at UB. There's competitions like Panache. I know there's other regional competitions too. There's certain public initiatives. There's grant programs, all that kind of stuff. And then also you're just gonna need to put some sweat equity in, meaning you work for the ownership of your business essentially. So if you do need funds, whether that is you need one funding round to get profitable, or you need multiple funding rounds, you basically have to plan what that use of funds is. So the first thing you want to do is figure out how much you need for basic startup costs, legal, accounting, et cetera, and then product development until that first sale. After that first sale, you start to generate revenue, which can partially be used to fuel growth in your business. And then once you start to generate revenue and you think you have product market fit in a market, how much you need to scale your product and sales and marketing after the first sale. And then you need to sort of evaluate and figure out, okay, are you generating enough profit at that point to scale your business at the speed you would like, or the speed that the market needs? Again, going back to the Uber thing, they needed to scale quickly because of competition that would come in due to the low barriers of entry. So if you're looking for sort of that hyper growth, or if that's something your market desires or needs, that's how you sort of calculate how much money do I need to scale to that point? How many hires do I need to make? How many offices do I need to open, et cetera, et cetera. And just sort of as a rule, I guess a cardinal rule, which has been included before, investors typically like to see profitability in year 2 or year 3 on your financial projections. It could take much longer in reality, as it did for certain companies like Amazon or WeWork when it was still a company. But investors also like to see that you're incurring losses, because it means you're attempting to grow. If you're spending more on initiatives that are going to pay off and help you grow, they also like to see that as well. And that's the reason you're sort of raising venture capital. So it's obviously to cover your losses in the first couple of years that are incurred by spending money on growth. So that's it. And if you guys have any questions, let me know. And I also sent this presentation to, I think I sent it to you guys. If you need it, you definitely take it. If you have any questions for me personally, just reach out via Blackstone LaunchPad.
Yeah, so if you have any questions, you could just turn your mic on, I guess, and ask them, or you just put them in the chat and I'll read them all. We have one from Court Burris. What is a healthy gross margin, would you say?
So that really depends on your industry. So for something like SaaS products, software products, because your COGS are so low, a lot of those products tend to see anywhere from like 60 to 80%. If you're something like a grocery store where your inventory is just freaking through the roof all the time, you're seeing maybe margins of like 10 to 20%. So it's basically whatever you can use or whatever you have left over from after producing that will enable you to grow your business via sort of sales, marketing, operations, et cetera, et cetera. But again, there's industry comparables for that kind of stuff online. So if you look up, what are healthy gross margins in software, like there's information like that online. It depends per industry at the end of the day.
There were just some things in the slideshow that I didn't know what they were. What is that, like an acronym?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Do you want to which things?
Basically all of them.
Okay. I would say the best thing to do then is just probably Google like what are financial projections, what are the line items, and there's like basic knowledge like that online. And then once you have an understanding of that, like this presentation will make a lot more sense.
Well, what's an ERM?
Oh, an ERP.
Yeah.
So an ERP is software that is used to run your business. So there's, I guess I'll shamelessly plug my friend's company again. So there's a company called Odoo. They're based downtown now. They moved here from San Francisco. They create basically these apps that help you run your business. There's like an inventory app, but that's connected to your accounting app. So anytime you pull out of inventory, that basically it logs it automatically into your accounting. There's also a sales app. So basically you have a database of all your sales contacts or your customers. Anytime you close a sale, that'll be counted as revenue, and that'll automatically be changed in the accounting app. So it's basically a software infrastructure to run your business.
Hey, Robin, thanks for a great presentation. And yeah, I actually saw an Odoo billboard the other day on Main Street. My question is, how do you plan for financial projections when you have kind of multiple revenue streams, but in the beginning, of the startup, you're really focusing on one revenue stream, and then maybe hope to in the future add more revenue streams?
That's really, really tough to do. I would say there's really no good like scientific way to do that, because you don't know which revenue streams are going to work or which products are going to work, which ones aren't. I know for a fact that, local businesses or even startups, they have this one core product and they start testing new features or new products. And this is what you don't hear about, but half of those products fail and they don't really tell anyone, but a small percentage of them actually work. So what I would say is, for an early stage startup pitching to investors, what they want to see is that you can add products that could expand the market or basically go deeper into your market. They want to see just the vision sort of, I guess, behind growing your company. So when it comes to actually like predicting those numbers or speculating on them, don't put a ton of thought into, a product that's going to come out 3 years from now. Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yeah, it does. I'm in a particular industry that's kind of difficult. And yeah, one of our main competitors relies on subscription-based revenue, and one of our competitors relies on a payment processing fee through insurance companies. So within the industry, within the competitors, there's different lines of revenue. And my hope right now is to start with a subscription model and then maybe add on a fee for service fee for insurance companies as well. But
are those two competitors hitting the exact same target market?
Yeah, private practice therapists. They're both therapy directories.
Okay, so yeah, if other competitors are doing that, you can probably assume that you can do that too, given that you're producing a hopefully somewhat better solution. Or there's just, a supply demand imbalance in that market, meaning there's not a ton of people who are hitting that market, but there's a ton of demand for the types of products. So yeah, I mean, those essentially those revenue streams have been validated in your market by competitors. That's another thing about, I mean, I could talk about this for a long time, but competition is good because it validates that a solution that you're thinking about selling is actually probably going to work. Like if you see other people selling it and people are buying it, if you produce a better one, they're probably going to buy that too, because this lesser version is selling right now. It's needed in the market essentially. But the question is, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but the question is, when you're producing a better solution, what are the switching costs for customers to your solution versus their existing solutions? And is the new solution worth switching to it or worth paying a little bit more or whatnot? But yeah, for yours, I think for your industry in particular, I think you could safely say that I'm going to produce a subscription model first and then do a fee for service on top. And that'll probably work because other people are doing it.
Go ahead, Michael.
Okay, Rohin, awesome presentation. Thank you for that. Super, super informative. I wanted to ask a couple of things. So first, my audio cut out, and I wanted to ask you if you wouldn't mind repeating what your role in the Buffalo startup ecosystem is. And then I have a question too. You mentioned earlier about the top-down approach being lazy, and I know that that's something that investors and pitchers will always get called on Shark Tank. And I wanted to ask if you're aware of any other, just like non-starters or like big mistakes that startups will make when they try to secure investing. And then one other thing I wanted to ask you about is if you had any comments on ACV and their IPO yesterday.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start from the top.
Thank you.
So currently, I'm the co-manager of the UB Seed Innovation Fund. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but I think you should be, and many of you hopefully will be eligible for it soon. It's a $10 million fund that is seeking to invest anywhere from $100K to $250K, but potentially more in follow-on investment into UB-based startups. So we're looking at students like Blackstone LaunchPad is like one of our feeders, like one of our source programs. But for that, typically you should have gone beyond just having an idea. You need to get to that MVP. You need the minimum viable product. You need to validate that MVP, and hopefully at that point you should start to be on the cusp of your first sales. So that's when we start to take a look at the deals. But we're actually creating a whole comprehensive sort of approach for you to get there. And it'll all be filtered through like UB programming and mentors and connections to investors, advisors, all that kind of stuff. So currently doing that. And then a couple of years ago, I started a private equity real estate fund. And right now we're working on we bought the whole Main Street in Niagara Falls. And we're working on a complete redevelopment of that.
Wow.
A much longer term project, but more of a passion project. Just freaking headaches all day.
Are you from the area?
Yeah. I grew up in Amherst with Rambada. Yeah. So the second question, which was non-starters. I would say there's not really, I don't think too many I can't generalize typically on non-starters. I can say for me, if there's typically sort of founder arrogance, like that's not great. Like we passed on someone just because like he was super, super arrogant. And then also he said that, there was a bunch of people testing his product. He was going to close X amount. That didn't happen. So like, that was another reason, but just no one really liked his personality, unfortunately, at the end of the day. I mean, I try to separate, investors' arrogance and their personality towards investors from their ability to run the business. Because some, arrogant, Steve Jobs was a dick. He grew one of the largest companies known to mankind. So I think that's probably a non-starter in the early days. I would say another non-starter is not knowing the sort of details of your business. A lot of early stage pitches are typically around the vision, and they use like flowery language to get their point across, and it's just more poetry than anything. But there's a way to present that big vision while at the same time being able to know every single detail of your strategy and plan. And that's what these financial projections help you do, right? If you go into a early stage investment pitch and you tell the investor that yeah, we talk to X amount of suppliers and X amount of customers. Like we know exactly how much this costs. Like we know that we're solving a problem because we talked to a bunch of customers and they're saying similar things, potential customers. Like that's really going to impress someone. And then you can go on about the vision and your big mission and stuff like that. So that's another one. But I think like beyond that, I would say not too many other non-starters. Like there's a whole, sometimes there's non-starters when companies get to the final term sheet stage of investment, the negotiation stage. In some, you know, you can, so for this, I think it's best to approach an investor with data from like TechCrunch writes about this all the time. A ton of people write about this, is like how much of your business you should give away at different stages of funding. And there's benchmarks for that. There's industry benchmarks for that. So if you walk into an early stage pitch meeting and all you have is, you know, an idea for the next Princess Diana Beanie Baby or whatever, like you ask for $5 million for, I think you see this on Shark Tank, you ask for $5 million for like 2% of your company. Like you can look online and find that the typical amount that startups tend to give away in certain industries at the pre-seed round is like, I think it's like 10%. So like make it like have like build a case for like why you're asking that much, and then use data you found online to justify it. Because you can't, like, I don't think any investor will necessarily argue if you have you know, a good case built up that is researched. It's, you know, it's like building a strong law defense or something like that. Like build a case around it. And then the third thing, ACV, that was huge. That's a huge win for Buffalo. I actually remember I looked at the deal before they won 43 North. These guys were literally on the verge of collapse.
Wow.
43 North saved them. Like they wouldn't have been around. So the fact that happened, the fact that like all these local Buffalo investors are now cashing out and they're going to reinvest in the community, that's huge. Like 43 North just set up a foundation because they made, I think it was like 10 or 15 mil off of it, or probably more. I mean, I don't know if they're holding on to some of it and they're going to sell later when the prices go up. So, but they're putting all that back into the community, which is just great for, you know, Buffalo, for you guys, which is, it's really exciting. A lot of the private investors are going to do that too. So I'm definitely pumped to see how that's going to supercharge everything here.
Absolutely. I have 3 very close friends who work there, so it's been very exciting for them too.
They're cashing in too.
Yeah, they are.
Nice. Good for them. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you for getting to all that. Very good memory.
Yeah, thanks.
Hey, Rohan. Thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask, based on the financial projection, you were saying it's best to start from a financial projection before you go into your business model. And you just hinted on that in terms of depending on what stage you're in a seed competition. And based on the slideshow you've presented, there's a lot of information. So if you had to necessarily say pick 3 out of these main topics to present and at any given time, what would be your 3 go-to to present?
So when you say present, what do you mean? Present to who? Like present to an investor?
Investor, yeah, because I mean, it all depends on the pitch the pitch or the presentation you're given, and sometimes you have to kind of balance it with the vision,
Right,
and the business model. So sometimes it's either too much information on one specific topic, which is the financial projection, versus the business model and the actual idea. So how do you necessarily like keep a good balance of everything?
So that's a great question. So the only thing I would actually present in the investor pitch as it relates to financial projections is this slide right here. If you can see this, it's a consolidated P&L. So that's basically taking like all the hard work you've done to come up with very detailed financial projections and boiling it down into one slide. You don't have to like, you know, go through every single line item. When I'm going through a slide like this, like I'd tell them, you know, we validated like cost of goods sold, COGS, which is second line item. We validated it through talking to manufacturers or app developers. We know it's going to cost around this much. We think the revenue is gonna be this much because we know our target market. We know that they want this product. We've talked to a lot of our customers, figured out that they have this problem. So we think we can sell this much every year based on the staffing and how we're increasing that. And then you tell, and obviously gross profit is just the revenue minus the COGS, and then the that's just how our business model works. And then but at the same time, we want to do like product development. We want to do R&D. We want to continue to make products. So that's why we're investing in R&D. And then G&A is basically, you know, just everything else. So that's like sort of a quick 2-minute way of going through it. Just make sure, I think at the end of the day, that when you do present this one short slide on financial projections, that they know, that investors know that you really put a lot of thought into this and validating every number, especially the year one numbers. Like the year 5 numbers get highly speculative, but the year, if they see that you've put thought into the year 1 numbers and validated those numbers in the real world by using the different methods that I described throughout this, like they're going to be very, very impressed by that.
Thank you very much. That clarifies a whole lot.
Yeah, no worries.
We could take just like one short question. One more short question, if anybody has one.
I have a quick question. Can you guys hear me? Hi, Rooney. Thank you very much for the presentation. So a lot of things I have learned today was a little bit foreign to me because I'm coming from software engineering background. Which resources do you suggest me to go and learn, or do you suggest me any books that I can go and purchase?
Yeah, for
to
sure.
learn about this subject?
Yeah, so I think the first thing you need to really learn about, as I said before, is customer discovery in the business model canvas. So there's an author I mentioned before. His name is Alex Osterwalder, I think. If you just search Oster or something, autofill will get you to what you need. But he has these 3 books. One's called Testing Business Ideas. The other one's right about the business model canvas. I would say first thing you need to do is really get familiar with his books in the way that he's able to test business ideas before you pour a bunch of time and money into it. And he's able to test those business ideas to see if it's worth pouring time and money into it. After that, I wouldn't necessarily say getting a book on financial projections. I don't think that's super important. I think you can mostly learn financial projections from the web, from a presentation like this, from the templates you'll find online, which I mentioned in this earlier, which is the Equidam and the Score Small Business template. Those are good ones. And then other books, I would say, in terms of designing your value proposition, there's one called 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. He started PayPal with Elon Musk and a bunch of other gents. And that's a really, really good book on figuring out whether you're building a product that's gonna matter to people over what they're using right now. But I would say those right there is a really good start. I mean, there's a bunch of books on, you know, how to build a sales organization, how to build a marketing team, how to market. But I don't think that's stuff that hopefully you'll hire people for. So I think what you need to learn is sort of, you know, if you're a software guy but want to get into be at the sort of CEO role and stuff, is just sort of, you know, how you need a sort of general overview of how each part of the business works, how each department works, and how they all interrelate, and how that affects the finances at the end of the day. But for now, I would say if you just have an idea and you're starting to build out a product, the Alex Osterwald books, and then Peter Thiel's 0 to 1.
The other good resource that we offer, like through Techstars and stuff, is the Techstar Toolkit, which is like a lot of like short videos. I posted in the chat a lot of short videos that kind of go over like way more of like the beginning stuff, like how to build your pitch deck, like how to really even look at the business model. Right. It's a great resource to start off like hand in hand with these books and the lectures that are going on.
Yeah, that's an amazing resource. I know, Rom, does UB, I remember when I was there, like we had access to some database with a lot of market research and stuff like that, and like market data. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I think it's mostly through the library now, but there's like a ton of library resources. And Celine, I forget her last name. She's on like the Slack channel for Blackstone LaunchPad. Like, and if you're ever interested in reaching out to her, like she can walk you through how to like kind of take advantage of like the UB library resources, which I think is the same database that you're talking about.
Yeah, probably. Like that.
Um,
I mean, I don't have access to them anymore because I'm not a student anymore. But that stuff was like a godsend because all the market data you find online, they're usually like paywalled. Like literally, some of these market research reports cost 10,000, like 10 grand. Like no one has 10 grand to spend on that. So, but this UB resource, it has all that market data. It has all the competitors in an industry. It has the slice of the market that each competitor is dominating. It has like very specific markets too. It's a really good resource to basically root a lot of your assumptions in data.
So,
Thank you very much.
there's also a librarian at UB, a business librarian, and you can sign up for time with her to do market research, and she'll just show you how to use all of those.
Her name is Carolyn.
No excuses, guys. I don't have that stuff anymore.
that's Carolyn, right? Who does that?
Carolyn something Russell. Yeah.
If you guys ever need information on that, I can try to connect you guys over Slack or email.
All right, so let me just wrap this up real quick, and then we'll transition into the Open Coffee Club. So I want to thank you, Rohan, again for coming and sharing your knowledge. Great presentation. Thanks for the crowd for sitting here and absorbing all that. Our next workshop is on April 1st at 5:30, so next Thursday. It's focused on social media marketing for your startup. Also, we have Health Futures Challenge, Students of Business, and Course Get Seated, which are a couple of competitions you can participate in if you have an idea. Also, we have venture coaching, which is Ram's part of. So if you want to talk to Ram further, I could drop the link in the chat. There it is.
Yo, and
Ram.
my buddy Dom Masana, he's also available for business coaching. He's on
there. You go. Yeah. So hit up Dom or Ram if you want business coaching. And yeah, thank you and have a good night.
Of course. And yeah, if you guys have any questions or stuff, reach out to Blackstone and they'll connect you. And I'm obviously happy to give, any advice you guys need. Obviously happy to pay it forward.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yep. Thanks, guys.